It's time now for perspective. Across the world, the pandemic has exacerbated wealth and social inequality as the poorest bear the brunt of massive job losses and successive lockdowns. And the United Kingdom is no different, with a hugely popular free school meals campaign by footballer Marcus Rashford shining a harsh light on the daily struggles faced by millions, many pointing to Rashford's activism as proof that campaigning for social justice does make a difference. And my guest today agrees. I'm joined by Tania Aubeelack, trustee and volunteer for Journey to Justice, a UK-wide human rights education charity. Thank you very much for speaking to us on France 24 today. Could you please start by telling me a bit about the origins of Journey to Justice? What exactly is your vision?
Thank you very much for having Journey to Justice this morning. So Journey to Justice started in 2012 when our director, Kerry Sopel, went to the United States at Little Rock High School. And she heard recordings of African Americans' family who chose to send their children to all-white schools in 1957. And she heard testimonies of tremendous courage, people risking their lives, their houses, and their jobs. And she felt compelled to tell those stories of courage here in the UK. So when she came back, this idea gained tremendous amount of support. And not only people wanted to tell stories from the US civil rights movement, untold stories, but people felt that stories of past struggle from the UK also needed to be told, as many identified the UK as a place of increasing wealth and income inequality. And also people felt that there was a lack of awareness of past struggles for human rights, social justice and peace. So all of this combined, Journey to Justice was born in October 2013, and we've started ever since. So last year was our 70th anniversary. And it's important to mention that people who started Journey to Justice truly and sincerely believe in the power of ordinary people when it comes to change around the world. So ordinary people, we mean people like you and me. We don't mean people that we know, that are well known and rightly so, like Nelson Mandela or Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We really talk about regular people who brought change in the world. So that's Journey to Justice and its origin.
And you mentioned just there that the history of the civil rights movement in the UK maybe isn't as well known, as well taught, as widely taught as it is possibly in the United States. Why is that, do you think, or why has that been the case? When it comes, so do you mean stories from the US not known here, or do you mean stories from the UK not known in the US? Yeah, why is it that stories of the struggle for social justice in the United Kingdom aren't necessarily known in the United Kingdom? Oh, I see. Well, I do believe that it is very easy to talk about the US civil rights movement because of its universality. We know that the US civil rights movement had a tremendous impact across the world when it comes to changing laws or galvanizing people to take action for social justice. So I think it's easy to talk about the US civil rights movement as opposed to talk about struggles here in the UK. So our flagship project, which is an exhibition, a touring, traveling exhibition, combines stories from the US civil rights movement, but also from the UK, and we make connections between the two. So that's the crucial part. So since it's not getting a lot of attention, we try to make connections. If I take an example, in Bristol, in this country in 1963, the Bristol bus boycott, where a omnibus company didn't want to hire Black and Asian workers, and the city decided to boycott this omnibus company in 1963. And this struggle very much took inspiration from the Montgomery bus boycott in Alabama in 1955. So those connections are being drawn, and we try to make sure that we highlight past struggles from this country. And I do believe that the US civil rights movement is easy to fall back onto because it's so well known and international. So yes. Now, you do rely on an army of volunteers to take part in your educational project. How do you go about encouraging people to become more actively involved in civic life? How do you go about that? Yes, so we have at Journey to Justice, we have a specific and I think unique approach in the sense that we combine human rights history, human rights movement history, stories, untold stories of ordinary people like you and me, and the arts. So the arts are crucial. So we've got this triangle that's at the very core of our work. And also we are very inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy, which is about inspiring people by the fact that we are all connected. So whenever there is injustice anywhere, it's a threat to justice everywhere. So at the core of our work, we've got this legacy and inspiration from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., as well as this triangle. So it is important to say that we don't define the action of somebody. So we are all on our own journey to justice, and we don't define the action. So the action could be very personal. It could be from writing a diary to maybe challenging a bullying boss, all the way to getting involved in a community or even global action or international solidarity. So that depends on the individual. We're very much beforehand, so we galvanize people to take action for social justice. And as I say, we use untold stories, we analyze them. What can we learn from the past? What was successful? What wasn't successful? And what can we learn from past struggles? As well as the arts, to express feelings, to react to all of those stories, as well as making connection with what's happening right now. What are the injustices? What are the connections from the past? What can we learn? And again, pass on the baton for future generations, as well as education, which is key in our work. So this is how we galvanize people to take action for social justice.
And of course, we're having this conversation at a time when the wealth gap is getting larger and larger across the world, exacerbated, of course, by the pandemic and successive lockdowns. Are there any key gains in the world of social justice that you think are at risk of being lost as a result of what we've seen in the past year?
As you correctly mentioned, inequality, the pandemic has very much poured gasoline on some underlying systemic inequalities. So I think it's important to understand as well that Journey to Justice has another project coming up, which is about challenging economic injustice. So I think that's very much at the core of a lot of social inequalities that we're finding today. So again, we will use our approach of combining stories, the arts, and history, human rights history, in order for people to feel that they can do something about economic injustice. So we've got tactics, explainers, and I think that's so important because, as you say, human rights education is so key, and I think we have a tendency of losing sight of this. For example, key articles in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, for example, that people is entitled to a house, to leisure. So all of this needs to be highlighted as there's increasing wealth and income inequality, and so many injustices being highlighted due to this pandemic.
Tania Aubeelack, I'm so sorry, we're going to have to leave it there. We've come to the end of our time. Tania Aubeelack, trustee and volunteer for Journey to Justice, a UK-wide human rights education charity. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A reminder now of our top headlines today. The EU's top diplomat prepares to meet Russia's foreign minister, pressure growing to punish Moscow for jailing opposition leader Alexei Navalny and detaining thousands of his supporters. And this war has to end. US President Joe Biden withdraws US support for a grinding 5-year-long military offensive in Yemen, saying it's time for US foreign policy to focus on diplomacy and democracy.